Hey, everybody, welcome to Resiliency Radio, your go-to podcast for the most cutting-edge insights in integrative and functional medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Jill, and with each episode, we dive into the heart of healing and personal transformation. Join us as we connect with renowned experts, thought leaders, and innovators who are at the forefront of medical research and thought processes. Today, we want to empower you with knowledge on your health and healing journey. I am so excited to meet for a second time. We've met at another conference. We were just going back to where that was. Christina Rasmussen, who's my guest today. She is an acclaimed grief educator and best-selling author of Seconds First through Hay House in 2013, and Where Did You Go? Harper One, 2018, and Invisible Loss with Sounds True, 2024. In 2010, 4 years after her 35-year-old spouse passed away from stage 4 colon cancer, she created the Life Reentry process, which launched her on a mission to bring compassion, grace, and validation to thousands while simultaneously establishing an exit from what she termed the waiting room. We're going to get into that today. She holds a master's degree in guidance and counseling. She is currently finishing her master's of fine arts in painting and drawing, and her grief work has been featured on ABC News and in Women's World, the Washington Post, and the White House blog. Welcome, Christina. I am so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to have this conversation and thank you for saying yes to this conversation to talk about something so difficult but yet very, very important.
This conversation is so important. I am so excited to be here. And your book, which we're going to talk about, Invisible Loss, super excited to dive into this. As we started, first of all, I want to hear your story, but before we do, I just want to frame this because what I have experienced in clinical practice in the last 6 to 12 months and longer, but it's just, I feel like the crisis, existentially and otherwise, for people is increasing, and everyone that I know has some sort of loss, grief, whether it's a illness, a financial loss, a relationship loss. I feel like the universe is really stirring things up and allowing us to go to the deepest levels of ourselves. Who are we? What's our identity? What do we actually hold on to? And where is our source of strength? Because if we don't have some sort of anchor, and I want to get into all that with you because you have so much to offer. But I want to frame it because I think the listeners, if you're listening, I can't imagine that you haven't in the last 6 months experienced something or some sort of a crisis. So, Christina, tell us about you. Let's go back to your story. How did this all start? How did you get into grief counseling? Let's set the stage for what we're going to talk about.
The one thing that people are very surprised to hear is that I chose to become a grief therapist before I experienced any tragedy.
Wow.
And people realize this and they're shocked, almost like it was destiny. I grew up in Greece, so you will hear a little bit of an accent. I grew up in Greece and then moved to England to do my undergraduate and my postgraduate degree. And that's when I decided my master's thesis, I wanted to be about grief. I said to my professor at the time, I couldn't imagine losing anyone in my life. I love people so much. I don't know how I would ever get through it. So I would love to be able to know how to help others who go through this. What I didn't know then was that just very few years later, my at the time 31-year-old husband would be diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, which is very rare at such a young age. And he passed away at age 35. And we had two young girls. And Jill, everything I studied and everything I learned as a professional, I actually used to facilitate support groups for spouses in Houston, Texas,
Wow.
at the Houston Hospice. And before this happened to me, and having the experience, having the reality of it, it was so different and so much more catastrophic than
Yeah.
I ever imagined. And I wanted to run away from my profession, and I did. I didn't think I could help anyone while I was suffering at the same time, and I actually never thought I would ever go back to do this work. So I ran away. I went back and did another postgraduate degree. I went and worked in the corporate world in human resource management for a few years as a single parent, making sure I had health insurance for my kids. And I hated my life. never thought I would ever survive this or ever smile or laugh or be happy. I thought it was the end of the world. And I mean, it was the end of the world. It was the end of the world that I knew. It
Yeah.
was definitely the end of the world. And Jill, I kept asking myself, my goodness, how come nobody, how come nobody said anything? I was angry that nobody said that this was almost unsurvivable.
Yeah.
Like this was, I don't know, everything changed. Everything I changed, the way I looked at the world changed. Um, it was just, I just couldn't imagine millions of people experiencing this. Now, every day, someone is losing someone they loved so much and they couldn't imagine living their life. I remember thinking, I wish it was me.
Yeah.
It would have been easier for me to die
Yes.
versus me having to survive losing him. And we
Yes.
were young and
Yes.
we were like just starting our life and two little babies. Like it was unfair. It was wrong. And then at the same time, it was destiny. You know, it was the beginning of this journey that I really didn't know, I didn't want, I was running away from, but ultimately I said yes to it. Years later, years after, like 4 years after he died, I quit the corporate job. I resigned
Yeah.
and literally stepped into this, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing anything, and I started from knowing nothing. I mean, I knew a lot, but everything I knew wasn't what people needed. I felt like I had to rewrite, not the script, but rewrite the way we are doing this and how we're doing this, and to acknowledge and validate what traditional loss was. And of course, that's where I started from tragedy, traditional loss.
Wow, is all I can say. I have so many thoughts as you share. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss, but the world is greatly benefiting. It's no wonder as I went into your book and started reading, you can feel that level of deep understanding and knowing. It makes me want to cry because my own journey at 25 getting cancer and going into the
Mhm.
healing profession, so similar in a way that why in the world would I get cancer at 25, right? Like, what in the world? I had to stop
I'm so
medical school,
sorry.
go to training. But you know what? The divine had a purpose because what happened was all of a sudden I went from doctor to patient, and you went from theory, and both of us, we went from up here, right? The
Yes,
theoretical, analytical mind, and we went to the heart space of like,
yes.
oh, wait, this is a whole nother space to deal with this. And I remember facing my own mortality and my own life and death. And then when I sat with patients years later, I could so deeply understand what they were going through when they were facing their own illness, their mortality. Like I was like, I have been there, and you too have been in the dark night of the soul. And there is no amount of book wisdom that can ever, ever, ever compare
And
to.
Jill, you must have been so scared. You must have been. I know that fear. So it is such a scary feeling when you're diagnosed with cancer that, and I'm getting goosebumps. It doesn't matter how many years go by. As you said this, immediately I said to myself, my goodness, she must be an amazing doctor, I said, because you understand, you have compassion. When a patient comes in and they're going through something really hard, you get it. You get it even without saying anything. Your patients must feel it, must feel this caring and this knowing. And I wish we didn't have to go through this. Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes,
But
yeah,
how profoundly it's changed us both and allowed us to do what our soul
yeah,
was meant to do in the world. Like
yeah.
I now see it as the greatest gift, but only now, 20 years later, I'm like, wow, the divine, I just thank the divine every single day for the gift of that. But at the time, it certainly doesn't feel like a gift.
Yeah.
So obviously you went through this really, really dark night.
Yes.
How did you get from there to coming back to this soul purpose and coming back to the work? Because I can't imagine how difficult that must have been.
Yeah, and I've told over the last, so jumped in back into this in 2010. Over the last 14 years, I've told people that it is the most devastating, catastrophic event that you can experience. And you don't think you can do it. You think that it's impossible for you to ever feel happy, to feel joy, to actually enjoy your life. And for the first I remember the first time I laughed or I smiled or I felt joy for a few minutes. And I remember it was exactly 2.5 years later. So for 2.5 years, and that was just a glimpse of
A glimmer,
I,
right?
I was like, oh, did I just enjoy myself doing this? Whatever. I don't even remember what it was.
Right.
Did I go to the movies? Did I? It was like a random Tuesday or something. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, oh, I feel a little better. And it was 2.5 years, and I've told this story to people 2.5 years later. And then it took however long it took to start feeling like more of those moments and another day like this and maybe a weekend, or actually weekends were hard.
Yeah.
Maybe a Wednesday morning it was okay or something like that. And then when I started helping others, I hated my corporate job. I felt like, my God, this is like almost like, and you probably felt the same thing, like you're an alien after going through, after facing death,
Yes.
right? Being experiencing all these emotions at such a young age, then you're looking at the world and you're looking at them going by their life and think they have no idea. They
Yeah.
know nothing. And I don't belong. I don't belong here and I don't belong there. And you question your relations with your friends, you question your relationships with everyone. And it's hard to integrate, re-enter, right? It's hard to go back. So in 2010, when I resigned, I had no idea how it was going to be. And I started writing.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, this is my second language. I mean, if you told me then, Christina, you're going to write 3 books, they're going to be translated in multiple languages by the three of the biggest publishing houses in the US, would have said, yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe it. There's no way, right? And I started writing, and I started writing just a sentence here and there on Facebook. That
Yeah.
was it. And I mean, now that page I started in 2010 has 500,000 people, over 500,000 people. And it was all like, it was almost like, and I want to say this to anyone who's listening, wherever you are in your life, when something is destined, you can't run away from it.
Yes.
And it will find you, and it will give you what is yours. Nothing will pass you by. If it's yours, it will be yours. Whether it's a new relationship, it's success, it's something that you want in your life. If it's meant to be, it will just be. And I couldn't believe that whatever I was sharing was resonating with people. I couldn't understand it. And I started on this new journey. And I think looking back, I was definitely surviving for a really long time, even after that, because I threw myself into work. And
Yeah.
maybe you're familiar with that as
Yes.
well, right? You're
Yes.
like, yeah, the best way I knew how is to learn how to get through this. So I read every neuroscience book there was. I educated myself with everything to do with the brain. And then I threw myself into this community of people who were suffering. And I felt like my life had not meaning, but there was a purpose. There was something that I was here to do. And I did it, and I was doing it. I maybe a little too much. I worked way too hard, and but it was worth it. And I'm sure you see this every day. Every day you work to help other people to make their lives better, and it matters. It really matters, Jill. It matters so much, and it mattered to me. And some of the community members over the years. I mean, I feel like even though I don't know them personally, I've met with some of them over the years in events and book signings and classes and all that, but almost like we have a relationship with the people we help in a way that we don't have a relationship with other people. It's a different relationship. It's I don't even know if there's a word for it. I know it's a professional relationship, but it has a lot of meaning. It really does. So that was healing to me as well.
I could not agree more. And
Yeah.
it's funny because my history, I used to stand up and lecture to physicians. I taught for 20 years and I do all the science and all the studies and everything. And then one day I heard kind of from the divine, you need to start telling your story. And it was so scary to start there, as you know, when you start to reveal parts of yourself, because in that world, it was very masculine, it was very academia, and it was very much like show the studies, wear your black suit. And what happened is all of a sudden I started wearing beautiful flowing colors. I started telling my story, and I'd stand up there, and sometimes I would almost cry with emotion, sharing the depth of that story. And
Wow.
what would happen was all of a sudden I connected on a whole different level. And now, just last weekend, I was traveling and speaking, and someone stood up in the very back of the audience and he said, Dr. Jill, 10 years ago, I heard you speak, and it changed the trajectory of my practice. And now I'm doing this, and this is happening. He stands up in front of everybody. But I know you know this too, because we both, as we impact people, I was like, the whole conference was worth it just to hear this one man whose life was changed by something I said 10 years ago. And it's
Yes.
so, I feel so humbled because who am I to get to speak or talk or share and have someone whose life changes as a result of that? And I know your story is the same, but isn't that the most blessed, profound
It
thing we
is.
could experience?
And Jill, can I just say something? I know we've met before, but it was with a lot of people that my memory is not like I feel like I think I remember when we met, but then again, this is more, I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time.
Yeah,
And can I just tell you what I'm a very direct person.
please.
I just I know we're in an interview, but I felt like as soon as you came through, I said to myself, this is a very nice and kind and caring person immediately.
Thank you.
That's what I felt about you. And like, I was like, she cares. She's a good person. And I know it's a very black and white way to look at the world, but that's the way I look at the world. And I've met so many people through this book and having these interviews over and over again. And I was struck by this feeling that anyone who's listening, I hope they're working with you. I hope whatever you're offering, they're taking it for themselves because it comes from this amazing place that I feel from you. And we don't know each other. Like really, this is the first time we're
Right,
meeting.
right,
So
exactly. But you know what? It's mutual. I loved you the moment we got on there. And at the core, I think that's where the heart comes from, is like if we
yes.
bring that unconditional love to the world, that really, I think, is the only thing that really heals is the unconditional love for ourselves in the crisis and unconditional love for others. But you're the expert. Let's dive into, say someone's listening. And like I said, I think people are experiencing crisis. Where do they begin? How do they start? Give us some pearls of wisdom in this journey.
So in this journey I have been on, I started with tragedy, working with tragedy, loss of a spouse, loss of a child. Divorce is a very big tragedy as well. I just want to say this to people. It's like the person you love has died for you, but is alive for everyone else. So it's a complicated tragedy. So I was working with my classes in the groups with tragic losses, but then I created this model that I call the Life Reentry model, and it would help people take them to wherever they were at, which I coined this term called the waiting room, where I believe that when something devastating has happened to us, when something tragic has happened to us, a moment, and in this book, I call these moments of impact. When a moment of impact, whether it was from a tragic loss or from a moment of shame, public shaming, a friend telling you something that hurt your feelings, something that is not considered traditional loss. When we experience something that hurt us, we actually step out of life and we go into a place in between whatever happened before that moment and what can happen next. And we stay in that place. We stay in that waiting room. We stay in that place to feel better, which is the right thing to do, which is great, which is awesome. Yes, go recover, heal. But then millions of people actually never go back to living fully, never. And for what I call an invisible loss, for those very considered trivial moments of embarrassment, shame, um, they don't think anything significant happened. They don't think they've really been impacted the way they have been impacted. And they let go of who they really are and kind of try to align with whatever the the world outside wants from them. So they can appear as if they're living their life. They can appear as if their life looks good. But when they are losing who they've been to become who they need to be so they don't experience a moment of impact again, they grieve their original self. And that's what invisible loss is.
That's what's so powerful about this book is as I dove into it, I was like, oh, this is so different from the typical grief books because
Yes,
it addresses every single soul who has ever walked this earth because every one of us has had, right? Because you think about like, and for me, I'm like, yeah, I went through divorce, I went through cancer, so I definitely have had losses, but I didn't lose my spouse to death, or so I could say, oh, well, mine aren't that big a deal, right? But that's what you're addressing is you're saying, well, wait a second, these are all a big deal, and
big
especially
deal.
if we dissociate from them and we start to live a
Yes.
partial shell of ourselves. I love how you say that.
And Jill, I cannot tell you how important it is for everyone who's listening to actually feel validated, especially if, as they're listening to this conversation, their memory takes them back to a moment where they felt shame, they felt impacted by the words of someone, by a teacher a lot. Oh my gosh, the amount of stories from like in classroom, teachers putting you down in public, public shaming is the worst. Anything that has happened, whether it was with a parent, with a spouse, think this is what I want everyone to take from this. When we don't even know that this has happened to us, meaning we know that it happened, we don't know what it did to us. And we abandon our true self. I call it the original self because um, the original self is the identity. It's the us that we came here to be. So every time we're experiencing an invisible loss, we're being impacted. We actually abandon another part of who we are because we feel we cannot be that person anymore because it's going to be rejected
Yeah.
and it's going to be hurt. So we let that part of us go. And then, and I always get goosebumps with this, and I'm too passionate about this, too passionate. Imagine that when you're making choices and decisions, whether it's a job decision, a relationship decision, any kind of even the clothes that you're wearing, how you cut your hair, how you put makeup on, where you live, how you decorate your house, all those decisions are based not on the original self, but on the self that's been changed to align with everyone else. And you end up living a life that is not yours. And then people say, oh, I don't know why I feel like this. I don't know why I feel stuck. I don't know why I feel down. I don't know why I'm depressed. Nobody has died. Nobody left me, but you left yourself. Jill, you have abandoned who you are to fit in the world around you so you don't feel hurt anymore. And you're not living your life. And imagine you spend the rest of your life in the waiting room because you're still in that place protecting yourself from a real life, the life that you deserve. And imagine dying like this.
Oh, there's such regret there, right? And the shame that, and I'll just tell personally, because I don't mind sharing, and maybe someone can relate.
Yes.
I grew up in a pretty conservative Midwestern area, and I always felt like I was too much, too loud, too wild and crazy in a very kind of gent like it was more of a silly, playful way. But I made myself small, and I said in my book, I kind of dialed the radio down from a 10 out of 10, which would have been my true self,
Yes.
my original self, to like
Yes.
a 6 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10. Like I dialed the radio down. And then I went into medical school, again, very masculine. I wore these black suits. Those black suits were not me. That analytical, like that was not the true self. Then what I've discovered, all of a sudden I have pink and red hair, right? And I
I
have
love
like,
it.
and just recently I did a photo shoot and they were like gowns and dresses and jewels. And one of my colleagues was like, well, that's not very clinical. Like that doesn't look like a doctor. But what happened is I finally am in this world and I'm still learning. I'm still in the process, but I'm really embracing this wild and crazy and fun and joyful 5-year-old who loves to be the life of the party and wear tulle skirts and ballerina clothes and jewelry and red hair and I'm no longer, but it took, I'm 48 years old. I don't mind saying that in public. And it took me 40 years to start to go back to that true self and say, wait, what does she need? And I literally for weeks had in my bathroom cabinet a little sticky note that said, to myself, what does she need from me today? And I
Wow.
started every day showing up for her in a way that was, and I still have the, oh, am I too much? Am I texting too much? Am I calling too much? Am I saying too much? Am I too much, too much, too much? But I'm starting to embrace that I am myself. And if it's too much, it's probably not the right relationship, right?
Yes, and Jill, I can't tell you how happy I am for you. First of all, I love the pink hair. I love that you're saying yes to yourself. I'm 52 years old, and the older I get, the more of that original, authentic, true self is coming here. And also, thank you for sharing the story that you just shared, and that the way that you're saying yes to yourself every day, and the way actually physically, I just chopped off all my long hair, and you probably were
Darling.
surprised when you first saw me. It's like, oh, where's is that Christina? And and the reason why I believe changing our physical appearance to match our inner self, the you that is you, is so important. People actually underestimate changing everything around us to actually get closer to that person. You are you're going to be in for a big surprise actually as you keep on going down this road, and keep going. Like, do not stop for anyone or anything. And sometimes there's a chapter in the book, it's
Uh-huh.
talks about divergency, like feeling divergent,
Yes.
very rebellious, because people will struggle to understand your journey because they will feel like they're losing you.
Yeah.
They're losing you, the you that you were before. And that's okay. And you're going to have to think about yourself. And Jill, we're here to fulfill ourselves. We're here for self mastery. We are here to live the life we're here to live. If we're living the wrong life, I don't know if you believe in, I believe that we come back over and over again, and living the right life every time we're here will get us to a better place every time we come back. Otherwise, we have to come back and do it over and over again until we get it right for ourselves. So it's very important to help others, but the most important thing is to say yes to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say yes to yourself.
And the bigger thing with medicine and healing, I mean, that's my practice. And what I've realized is as I model this, and I don't have it all right, I just continue in the journey every day. But as I encourage patients to do the same thing, guess what? You won't be surprised. Their health transforms because when we're
Oh,
living a disingenuous version of ourselves, it's even like I always think autoimmune. Gabor Mate talked about the metaphor of self-attack, self-hatred, right?
yes,
Maybe you can talk a little about that because what happens when we're not authentically ourselves, we are disowning parts of ourselves, right? And that
yes,
results in physical illness.
yes. And it's funny because when I was diagnosed with my own autoimmune disease, I have Sjogren's.
Yes.
And I was diagnosed with it in the midst of, you know what, it was 2018, 2019, as I was starting to feel like I was working way too hard and I was giving everything to others and I wasn't keeping anything for myself. There was nothing left for me. And I remember getting the diagnosis and I was like, I didn't even know what it was.
Right.
I didn't even know. I had to look it up on like the doctor said, you have dry eyes and like dry mouth. I'm like, and it's so much more than that. But I was shocked by it. But yes, it's autoimmune is attacking. We're attacking. I love it. I never thought of it like this before.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yes, attacking the self. That's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about, I'm sure that we have lots of women who listen to us, and since we're women and we're taught that we can talk to men and women, but I'm just thinking right now that woman right there about our age and is out there and hearing and resonating with what we're saying, but she's still living in a bubble, in a place, a
Yes.
box. I always say it's like a container that someone
Yes.
else told her she needed to stay in. Where does she start? Where does
Yes.
she start to open this box and be her authentic self?
So I want to say everything I share here, and for those who are listening, never heard of me before or don't know anything about my work, this work, thousands of people have gone through this work. So this everything I say has been, we've had clinical trials on my work.
Wow.
Scientists have studied the work. Like everything I say has been given to people, and I've seen it come to life many, many, many times over many years. So when you start this journey, and let's say as you're listening to this conversation, you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, I probably have a lot of invisible losses. And the reason why I say it's invisible, it's not just invisible from the outside, it's invisible to you. It is hidden from you. You don't know that you're grieving yourself, the self that you were here to experience and express. You don't know this. You actually have no idea that this is happening. You're just feeling anxiety. You're feeling some depression. You're feeling like this is not exactly how you need it to be, but you don't know what you need to change. When you start your journey, it is important to actually discover some of these invisible losses. So in the book, I I no longer teach. I also want to say I no longer teach this. I no longer have classes. I don't have a private practice anymore. And I said to myself, this is the way I can give this work can continue moving forward. When you track down your invisible loss, you start to understand who you are and why you behave the way you behave. So there's a couple of exercises that you need to do in the book. They're very simple. They just help you track memories down. But let's say you don't have the book. Let's say there's no book in front of you. You're never going to get the book. You're sitting here, you're just driving somewhere. What do you do? What do you do? The very first thing I want you to do is to consider the possibility that just like we shower every day and we brush our teeth every day, there's all these thoughts that you have been thinking and you have been processing that have never been cleansed. They have never been shed. They've never been shared, not even with yourself. So the very first thing I tell people to do is to do either a verbal cleanse or a written cleanse. And you might think this is very basic, but let me tell you, it's very powerful, especially if you are going to share your cleanse with someone else,
Mhm.
or if you're in a group setting and you're sharing your cleanse with other people. This cleanse is a stream of conscious. You basically write down without filtering yourself, without lying to yourself, without any filter whatsoever, anything that's on your mind. Anything that is on your mind, you're writing it down. You're writing it down. And you're taking it from this autopilot place where you wake up every morning and your thoughts are driving your everyday without you interacting, without you being in control of anything that you're experiencing. And for the first time, you have it down. Most books and most advisors and therapists and people out there will say that's enough as a first step. But what we do with what you just wrote is finding what I call the survivor self. There is there are sentences in your cleanse, there's thoughts that actually helping you survive versus thrive. Those thoughts are helping you stay in the waiting room versus living your life. And you have to find what they are. And in order to do that, you have to be brave and you have to look at what you wrote and read it to yourself and find the parts of that cleanse that come from fear and they come from doubt and they come from shame. And then you are going to change that. You're going to change it. And when you change, when you rewrite those fear-based survival thoughts into thriving and kind of more closer to who you are, you take your first step out of the waiting room based on that reframe of the survival based narrative that lives in your cleanse. And this might sound complicated, but I promise you it is not. And that first step out, it has to be the right step. So if you take everything away that I just said and we simplify it even further, let's say you want to take a first step in your life to feel better, to be better. Make sure that that step is in the right direction because when our thoughts are based on survival, we are still deciding. Even the new things that we're deciding to do, they're based on surviving and not based on that original self. And I've seen this so many times, so many times.
So powerful. So I'm just thinking of my own experience and how did we really reach the people listening out there. And one of the things, like my old narrative, I would say my fear-based narrative was I'm too much, right? My 10 out of 10 self is too
Yes.
much for people. So how would I take that survivor self that says, Jill, you're too much. You better be more quiet, not so loud or not so whatever, so everything, right?
Right.
Even so joyful, which makes me want to cry because how can we possibly be so too joyful? But that
Yes.
was the thing, right? So how would I talk to that survivor part of myself
Yes.
and reframe that, like
So
practice?
yeah, so let's say this is a perfect example. So let's say that in your cleanse, you're writing something about something that happened the day before. I was hanging out with my friend. I'm just kind of
Sure.
because
Just make it up. Yep. That's
hanging out
exactly.
with my friend, and I said something, I did something, and here I go again. It's just too much. I'm too much. I'm just too much for people, and I don't know why I have to go and do this over and over again. Like, when will I stop, right? So that is that, and you could write about other things, but that's exactly right. That's a survivor-based thought. That's the fear. That's the fear of being your true self, and therefore you take it away. You take it away from yourself. So now we have to come in and say, how can we reframe that? And everyone I've ever worked with said this to me. This feels unnatural. It's very hard to reframe because at first it doesn't feel like a natural way to think.
Yeah.
And it's okay that you feel like that. It's okay that you feel it's unnatural. You will maybe feel like you're lying when you're reframing this, right? So, Jill, is it okay if I ask you,
Yes, please. Let's do it.
how would you reframe that this sentence, I am just too much? And remember, when you wrote this, um, you also probably felt like you shouldn't be too much, right? That I shouldn't be behaving. I'm too loud. I'm too this. How would you take this and reframe it and change it?
Yes, I would say, what if, sweetheart, by you being colorful and vibrant and joyful and living life at 100%, you actually inspire all those other women out there who are not living full 10 out of 10 vibrancy? What if your being your true self is the thing that inspires someone else to be able to not suffer what you suffered?
And now this is perfect, by the way. Now you're going to take this and how do you translate that into action? So this is called the stacking practice. The cleanse, stack one, the survivor pattern, stack two, the reframe, stack three, the plug-in, which is a 5% low risk step out of the waiting room that is based on the reframe. So you take a small step, not a big step, something that is not going to make you feel afraid to do it. How does the reframe would translate into a step, into an action in your life on that day that you're doing this cleanse?
Ah, so I know one thing I did in that process, and it was put on my tulle skirt and my pink light up roller skates and roll down my hallway.
Yes, that is the perfect plug-in. How did you feel?
It was amazing. It was amazing.
And for anyone who's listening to this and saying, "Okay, you women, how are you? How how is that going to change my life?" Right? Because remember, most of my classes, I had so many people suffering so many things, right? So in the beginning, people would say, how is that going to change my life? Okay, I do it. And let me tell you, I just wish people believe the people who have not experienced this, they believe this. Imagine that every day you spend 10 minutes a day doing a quick cleanse, finding your fear, rewriting that fear, stepping out of the waiting room by taking action based on that reframe. Do you know what happens? And Jill, you're going to tell me because I know you've gone through this path. What happened to you 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, when every day you're adding a new plugin and a new reframe? All of a sudden, what happened?
I had so much more energy and joy because I was really aligning with myself. And you know what came from that? I went to a conference in Las Vegas last year and I brought my roller skates, and in public, I roller
I
skated through
love
the
it.
conference because I had practiced at home, and I was like, who cares? And you know what happened? You saw the delight, because who adult, like physician teacher, is in pink roller skates? And but you know what? The light up of the faces around me were worth every moment for me being out there.
Yes. And your life, and what happens is actually you start making decisions from that self. That's the original self. You're actually integrating the survivor and the thriver. And there's another part that I call the watcher, which is the wise part of us. Everything comes to you. We can never get rid of the big announcement here. I have tried to get rid of the survivor self. Okay. It's in our biology, it's ingrained in us, but we decrease the percentage that we interact with every day. So we decrease that. So we start out with most people without doing any kind of work, whatever work is out there that works to help you thrive. Most people are at around 80% survival mode every day, minimum, and they're just surviving their life. They wake up every day. So that percentage goes down. And then you have the thriver self coming higher up. You have the watcher, the wise, the wisdom. When every time you reframe, it's that wise part of you that's helping you rewrite the script that's been automatically used from your survivor self every day, and you're rewriting it. I want to share a personal story. In 2021, I started my biggest reentry of my life. And remember, I lost my husband. I've been through a lot of devastating, and I've reinvented myself many times. I've done many different things. So when I say the biggest reentry, the biggest exit out of the waiting room, says something.
Yes.
In 2021, I applied. So this is about destiny again. And so whenever you receive a no from somewhere, trust it. I applied for to do a PhD in neuroscience at UT here in Austin. And I said to my therapist, listen, if I don't get in, if I have time to do a PhD in neuroscience while I'm writing my third book and I'm teaching a million classes and doing all the things, because I used to say I will never have enough time to be an artist. That was my dream as a child. I've always wanted, I was I was born and I just wanted to be an artist always. And many obstacles came in the way that didn't make that happen. I said to her laughingly, I said to her, if I don't get in, which my big head told me, of course I'm going to get into
Right.
UT to do a PhD in neuroscience. Look at all the work I've put out in
Right.
the world. My work was being studied by all these scientists. Like I was like, of course, there was no
Question.
doubt in my mind. I didn't even get an interview. I just got like an automatic letter that said, sorry to inform you, very high demand, whatever. And I told my therapist, if I don't get in there, I'm going to go and do an MFA in art.
Wow.
And she said, so
Uh-huh.
I said, well, I guess I have to go and do it.
You said it out loud.
And I did. I started with one class. I got into a school in a college in San Francisco, and I did however much I was allowing myself to do. So I started with one class and I added, and I'm going to graduate with my MFA in art in May, finally. But it's done. I did it, and there's a lot of other things that I'm doing, but I've literally changed my life so dramatically while writing a book, while teaching, while doing all these interviews. Like I would go from this room to my studio to paint, come back here. Sometimes I had paint on my face. And just like your roller skates, just like your pink hair, I said, I don't care. I don't care if I have paint on my face. This is the way I live my life. And sharing this with my community, it has inspired even more people by me re-entering in this way than me teaching, just teaching this versus really living it. So sharing our stories, I think is so important because it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what your dreams are, where you are in your life. Actually, the best place to start is from nothing, from just bottom. And that is the best place. That's the playground of reentry. That's the playground for a new life. That's when you take one step out after you reframe, make sure that it's in the right direction, because you can actually take steps in the wrong direction, not knowing what your invisible losses are, not knowing where your original self is hiding, not really, because, and this is actually very important. And I always want to make sure I say this, your life can appear perfect from the outside. You may have been told many times, what do you have to complain about? You have everything. You may have the perfect looking relationship. You may have the perfect looking house. You may have, you may be financially great. Actually, invisible loss, moments of impact, survivor self is even bigger and greater with successful people, because their survival mechanism is that success. They're succeeding to survive, to feel validation, to feel seen. But who is being seen is actually not who they are, but it's the version of them that lives in the waiting room. Because when you're enjoying the journey versus the destination, that's where you're living the right life.
Christina, your work is so profound and most profound because you're living it. And
Yes,
I'm so sorry you had to go through loss, but it is just so powerful, your story and
yes,
what you bring into the world. And it's so clear. Like you saw my energy. I see you too, and I
yes,
love you. And it's
yes,
just so
me
much
too.
joy to
Yes,
share. I feel you. And I know our listeners can too. Um, what if fear is our biggest blockage?
yes,
So I want to
yes,
speak in the last couple minutes to the woman or man out there who's hearing this, but like, yeah, that's easy for you to say. You guys
yes,
have done this or whatever, and they're afraid, or they're stuck in the wrong marriage or the wrong relationship or the wrong job, and they've built this entire empire around something that's not authentic.
yes.
What do you say to that person?
The fear comes from thinking that we have to take a really big step out. I don't want,
Good.
and I'm going to speak directly to them. I don't want you thinking about the big steps or what will happen if I do this. I want you to start from the beginning. I want you to start by just checking in with yourself, doing that cleanse, looking to see, and without assuming what your fear is, because I promise you this, the survivor self is very smart. It's the smartest part of you. Unfortunately, I know,
Right.
I wish it wasn't
Yeah.
like this too, but the survivor part, and I used to do this exercise. I would tell people, if we're gonna talk without the survivor self here. So, and this, let's say I had 150, 200 people in my class. I'd say, I want you to send your survivor self away somewhere for the next 5 minutes. Where would you send your survivor self? And 95% of the people would send them to a tropical island for cocktails. And whether I was doing that exercise in class or on a book tour or like in a workshop, it would come back the same. And I was like, Jill, I was like, what? I can't believe it. We actually, no wonder we have such an intense relationship with our survivor self, because we love that part of us, because it has gotten us through some really hard places. So this is complicated, you guys. It's complicated to try and let go of that survivor self, because there's a big part of us that is attached to that part. We feel like we need that part of us to get through the day. But if we're living the right life, we won't need it. So don't be afraid to do this stacking practice, because it's going to reward you and it's not going to put you in fear mode. You're already in fear mode. It's going to help you feel rewarded and happy, just like you put on your roller skates. Just, I don't know what your first plug-in is, this person who's listening, your first step is, but be ready to be surprised of what that is. And it could sound and be trivial. The more trivial it is, the more right on track you are. The smaller the step, the lesser the risk, the better it will be long term. It means that you will keep re-entering, you will keep getting out of the waiting room every day. And then one day, you're going to look around you, and I promise you, you'll find yourself in a completely new life. I don't know what happens next for me, but I remember I've been in this reentry process for the last 3 years, and for this part of my life. And I had said about 6 months after the book comes out, and when I graduate in May, um, after that, when people ask me what I do, it would be I'm an artist. And
Oh,
people could think I'm just a hobby. I have plans, and I trust the original self to guide me to my destined path ahead. And I'll tell you, the experience of joy that I feel, just like I didn't know how catastrophic grief was, I actually did not know how blissful joy is until now.
yes.
It's
Oh, and I can
incredible.
second that. I can second that from the practice with the roller skates
Yeah.
and many much bigger things. Like you said, started small. It's been profound because I have tapped into a joy that's deeper and more profound than I've ever experienced. And I know it's only going to increase. So if you're listening,
Yes.
I hope Christina, you are a gem in the world. You are a light. You are so important of what you've brought. And I'm sorry you've suffered, but it is so evident that that's transformed you and also transformed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. One last thing that comes to mind is the words of Liz Gilbert. I recently heard her talking to her fear, and she said, "Sweetheart, we don't have to know what comes next." And I love that so much because so often we're
Yes.
running ahead and we're saying, "Oh, what after the roller skates? What comes next?" Or after the art, what comes next? And they're like, "Sweetheart, you don't have to know what comes next, or we don't have to know what comes next." And
Yeah.
it's freeing to think that way, isn't it?
And because what's happening while you're roller skating, while I'm painting, is I don't want to be anywhere else.
Right.
I don't want to be in the next in the tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in the yesterday. I'm actually so, and I know you feel this way too, Jill. Like you're so happy in the present moment doing this thing because it's about the journey. When you're loving your life, you're not wishing it away. You're not thinking, I just have to get there. There's nowhere to get. You're here. You've made it. It's
Yes.
you're living it. You're living it.
Yes.
So, and thank
Oh,
you for
so
having me.
you are
Thank you,
so welcome. So
thank
when
you.
people want to find your book, because this is the place to start. If you don't have a copy of this, go out and where can they find this? Where would you like them to
Yeah,
send
they
you?
can
Website?
go uh, just put Invisible Loss on Amazon. It will come
Perfect.
out. Website invisiblelostbook.com. Anywhere books are sold, you'll find it. We're just getting the German translation. We just got the Vietnamese translation where so many people from different countries can get it too. And my work, ChristinaRasmussen.com. Right now, I only support my community on social media, and I'm doing these interviews. And I hope the book is more than enough for you to take this journey. Please say yes to the work, yes to the stacking practice. It will take you 10 minutes a day and you will feel like you'll you'll see it will be an incredible experience. And thank you for having me, Jill. This was awesome.
Are welcome. It was an absolute joy. And thank you all for listening to another episode. You can find all my episodes at jillcarnahan.com. Christina, you are a gem. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you.